Serves you well. Great. Thanks for the shout out. Alrighty, let's get rolling. Today we are, oh my gosh, I do that like every other time. Call to actions, you know? Today we are talking about testing. So in this class, we have our two big questions we're kind of trying to answer throughout the semester. How do I design with research? How do I research for design? And thus far, we've been talking about the blue, design with research. We've talked about all of these research-backed psychology principles, best practices design, and things like that. And now we're going to talk about, okay, given you know all of these principles and some of these best practices, how do you conduct research so that your designs are optimized for whatever specific context you're in? So now we're in the research section. And on our little journey, we have crossed into the yellow, and today we are talking about assessing information architecture. And I'll cover two methods, tree testing and card sorting. So excited to talk through this. Most of our time spent on card sorting today is sort of hands-on discussions activity, which is the foundation of your homework assignment. So I'll be explaining your homework assignment kind of in that mix of everything because the business case we'll cover today as a class is going to be part of your homework assignment. I am behind on grading. I'm about 50% of the way through homework 4, and you all just turned in homework 5. So I expect to get both done this weekend, but might bleed into Monday. So apologies for the delay. Maybe I'll post the ones that have already been graded, actually. I like to grade everyone's. I always grade blind, by the way, but sometimes it's really obvious who's whose. But I like to grade in random order. I like to grade blind, and then I like to grade all of them and then look at the distribution and make sure it wasn't like, oh, Dani was tired or hangry or whatever after grading 9 of these in a row or something. So I really care. It usually only budges anything by a point, but it makes me feel better. Those of you who are like psychology people, I think you understand. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the reading. You read a chapter out of this book, Measuring the User Experience. I really like this book. You have access to it through the Claremont College's library for free. And remember, even as an alum, your Claremont College's library login still works. Pro tip. So you have access to this digital copy. And I kind of wanted you, like, there are a lot of chapters I could have assigned for this past week, but I thought this was just a good review of like the most common arguments. I wanted you to know that there's a chapter out there that kind of helps you argue the most common arguments. So it's a good resource in that way. And I just wanted you to get like a little preview of this book. So now you've read that chapter, you kind of have a sense that this whole book is about metrics and things like that. A lot of what is in here is covered in the book you're about to read, which is Quantifying the User Experience. But this book is really hard to read. That's why we're going to do it together. This book is really hard to read. This book is much more friendly to read. So when it comes to like the references you're taking away with you, especially those of you who are entering the job market, I just kind of wanted you to preview this book because I think it's a lot more friendly than this book. And it'll get you like 60, 70% of the way there. So there was the rationale you never asked for. But in terms of the reading discussion you all participated in, let's see some of the call outs. Award-winning topics. Oh, I loved Malia's call out of for your e-commerce business. You were talking about how like you had gut feelings about what would work, and then that's not what sold. And I could not relate more with my experience in e-commerce. I remember clear back in like I don't know, this is probably like 2016, 2017. One of the e-commerce companies I worked for sold these finger monkeys, like little monkeys that you put on your fingers, like little, I don't know. Anyway, they sold like hotcakes. I mean, we made like $2 million in 2 days or something off of these finger monkeys. So we worked with a bunch of sellers to sell more of them because it was like, holy cow, these are in such high demand. So we booked all of these things for like 2 months after to to meet the demand of these like finger monkeys. And it just turned out that it was like a fluke thing, and we made $2 million in 2 days, but like the finger monkeys didn't sell after that. And then they were just taking up space on our site. And forever after, whenever there was a product that went like, I won't call it a viral because this was not that, but like unexpectedly exploded, we were always like, is this a finger monkey situation or should we actually stock more of that product? But it was just funny because we were like a women's lifestyle and clothing brand, not we sell finger monkeys brand. So very strange. But once again, like your gut just can't predict some of these human behavioral things, right? So I loved that little call out. Lots of you talked about the AED example in the chapter. So I really liked that. Medical devices are so tricky when it comes to testing. And whoever was talking about, like, isn't there a legal standard here? Yes, and you're totally right. To get like FDA approved and things like that. There's really rigorous medical device testing that goes on. And the practices for medical device testing are pretty rigorous too. So I don't know, a couple of you talked about like more scientific rigor and how different metrics translate from our academic world into applied UX. And I would just let you know that if you really like kind of rigorous academic research, but you want to be doing something with real world applications, medical tech and government are two avenues that like they hire UX researchers, but usually are hoping for more of that like rigorous academic background. And they're expecting you to do like higher rigor research. So that came up for me when I was thinking about all your comments related to the AEDs and also voting. Oh, we could talk about the problems. Yeah, but we won't. We're just going to set that aside and be like, yes, there are lots of problems with the voting process, the voting materials, the voting, like even the poll, like the electronic poll units that we have. Lots and lots of interesting stuff. Oh boy. So let's see here. AEDs, attack. Rosie called out Chick-fil-A. One thing I really wanted to talk about is small sample size. This will never go away as an issue for like UX professionals. The thing about small sample size is what kind of question are you trying to answer? What is your outcome that you're seeking for your research? In academia, we are almost always trying to discover a principle that is generalizable across multiple contexts. In business, we don't usually care whether, something is going to translate to other businesses. All we care about is what's happening today, right now, for this organization, for this user population. And because of that, we can get away with smaller sample sizes because we don't have to generalize to a wide range of users sometimes. Sometimes we do, right, Ian?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say during our internship, we had a meeting and Brock went on, I don't want to say a tangent, but explaining something for us. Or I guess, is it Nielsen Norman Group? They
Mhm.
have a rule where it's like you can catch 80% of your flaws with only 5 usability tests. Small sample size, but still get the job done. And he just went on saying, how do you know that's only 80%? How do you know what all your issues are? And so on and so forth. Is that kind of like one of those examples of that time where
Yes. And I mean, we're going to actually talk about that rule and where it came from. And for those of you who want to fall down that rabbit hole, you're going to be given the articles to fall down the rabbit hole. I think one thing we'll talk about is in UX, so often we are answering two kinds of questions. One is, what is present in the population? What behaviors, what attitudes are present in the population? It doesn't really matter if only 1% of people are experiencing an issue where they can't call an emergency suicide hotline. 1% matters. One person matters. It only matters that that error is present. We don't care if it's one person, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, that error is present matters. And then there are contexts where we decide based on a certain prevalence, a certain frequency in the population. That's when we're going to care about it. So like this is really common in e-commerce. What percentage of the population needs to experience a problem for us to change something? And this actually goes back to Yanjen and Smriti. We're talking about inclusive design and like how do you extend to diverse populations? This is like the argument that goes back and forth around that. It's like, okay, well, for people who are coming to the site and English is a second language and maybe not as proficient for them. If that's only 2% of our population, an e-commerce company might not care to address that issue. What we have to come to the table with as UX professionals is like, why does that issue still matter? And how might us solving for that issue actually make everybody's experience better? So you get larger and larger, like Amazon cares about 2% because that's millions of dollars. But some like $50 million a year little e-commerce company is probably going to let that one slide. So this is always the game we're playing. It's like I say the risk determines the rigor, but we also are always thinking about like, is a behavior present? Is a behavior prevalent? And back to the Nielsen Norman group thing, I can't even unpack it right now without going way too deep into it. But the way they did it is like they did a really big evaluation, and it's like, okay, here are all the errors we found in this really big evaluation. And then they did the same evaluation with just 5 people, and they were able to find the presence of 80% of the errors in just those 5 people, if that makes sense. So both arguments are arguments I make all the time. I'm often arguing in favor of small sample sizes, but just as often I'm arguing we can't just get away with 5 people on this. And it just depends on like what the research question is. So if you don't like the words "it depends," then you're gonna struggle. You're gonna struggle in UX. But once again, like that's the creativity. That's what's like so interesting about the job is it depends. So you have to figure it out every single time, which means there are always interesting challenges. Okay, pep talk on sample size you didn't ask for. Way too early in the morning, but that was a theme that came up several times that I just wanted to touch on. Any other comments or thoughts on the reading? And Sean talks about moderating variables in the chat, which is a great segue into, I want to know how confident you feel about each of these statistics concepts. And then at the end, just like generally conducting a usability test. How confident are you with all of these? And you'll just stamp wherever you fall. Great. Okay, so what I'm seeing here for t-test and ANOVA, there's like high medium confidence. If you don't feel very confident about t-tests, in the Quantifying the User Experience book, I posted this in last week's module on Canvas, but there's an optional reading for you. There's like a crash course in statistics toward the end of this book. I think it starts on page, I put what page it starts on, but that is the printed page number, I believe, not the like digital page number. So you'll just have to look around if you end up in the PDF, the backup PDF. But toward the back of this book is like crash course on statistics principles. So I recommend you take a look at that if you're not feeling so confident on t-tests and ANOVAs, because that's sort of the basic, the other thing is just like reporting confidence intervals. We're going to go through how to do each one of those, but if you don't understand theoretically what we're doing, then probably good to revisit that a little bit. Linear regression, folks are feeling pretty good about overall. So like maybe some folks in here, that's okay. I have made it so every homework assignment, you choose your own adventure when it comes to stats. So if you're really comfortable with t-tests and ANOVA and not so much regression, you can just use t-tests and ANOVA. If you're comfortable with regression, then you can use regression. Binomial regression, I think look, it's a bimodal distribution. Just like binomial regression. Okay. I think we're not quite there yet for the first year students in your regression course, right? Yeah, okay. So that is also a choose your own adventure, but it does come in handy. So we'll give you an alternative path to that one. And then finally, we're also seeing this like a group of people feel really good about usability tests, a group of people not so good. Great. Well, the next 4 weeks are just us talking about how to do usability tests. So I think these folks, you will refine, you will learn something because we are going quantitative with our usability tests rather than qualitative. But I think we'll get these folks here and like these folks here. So that's my recommendation to you. Your reading assignment is the first 2 chapters in this book, and just pace yourself. Like, just take it a little bit at a time. Highlight, tag, whatever you do. If you have a physical copy, take a lot of really good notes if you have a digital copy. And if there's a few paragraphs you don't understand, gosh, I would even invite you, like, if you can copy paste those paragraphs into something like ChatGPT and have it like walk through those things for you, or if you're in a physical copy, ask ChatGPT to explain the paragraph. That's a really great resource for just like, do I know what is being said? So there's my pep talk slash warning label, I guess. We will do it together. Any comments or questions on the upcoming readings or anything like that? Okay. No stats today. Today we're talking about information architecture assessment. And the first thing I want to run through with you is something called a tree test. How many of you have ever done a tree test or have heard of a tree test before? Anyone? Okay, maybe 2 of you. Great. I'm glad I get to be the one to explain it. So tree testing is not so complicated. What we're assessing is typically the navigation structure of a site. And what we want to know is, given the categories and the subcategories we have on the navigation menu, do people know where to find something? Have you ever been on a government website and you're looking for like, I don't know, how to file my business taxes or renewing my driver's license or something, and you look at the menu and you don't even know which category to click on, right? Or like maybe it wasn't a government website, but I feel like that's the most common for me is when I look at the menu and I'm just like, maybe I'll go to search. Like maybe I'll just go straight to search because I'm not even sure like how to drill down and find the area that I'm looking for. That navigation structure and that sort of problem is what tree testing tries to solve. So you'll either have a clickable prototype of your experience, or most commonly, you'll just do this where you'll have in text format, you'll just spell out your navigation structure. So each of these would be like collapsible sections and subsections. So I could sort of like expand this and expand this. So home, citizen, popular online services, etc. And what you do is you give the participant something like, how would you renew your driver's license? And you see where they would go. And you see if they even get close to the page that, or the section, or the subsection, or the sub-subsection that you would want them to go. So this is a great situation where you give them a task and then you track where they click and where they end up. You often report first click, so whether they clicked the first thing they clicked, whether it was right or wrong, whether they were able to complete the task at all, like did they end up finding the page they needed to find? And if so, how many clicks did it take them to get to that page? So let's say the happy path was like, you can do it in 3 clicks. So if on average users are taking 5 clicks, we know we have a lot of room for improvement here. So this is a tree test. Some people also do time on task, so they'll time participants. I don't love time on task as a measure most of the time. You'll find that out about me. But I think depending on depending on the situation, that might be a very valid measure. I once worked on a lot of internal tools where customer support representatives needed to answer a queue of hundreds of tickets where they were like responding to emails and such. So saving 30 seconds on average of time was dollars to the business. So I captured time on task. So sometimes that really matters. Hannah?
This tree testing is fairly remnant of information architecture of navigation to me. Is I think this version is just more like in that image more like vertical to me and I don't know, it's just like it seems very similar to like the navigation model. I'm just curious like what's the difference between them two?
Yeah, so tree test is how you evaluate or determine whether your information architecture is succeeding or failing. So your information architecture is the way all of your content on your site is set up. It's the structure of all of your content. And tree testing is evaluating the structure of your content, specifically the menus.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Here's a little image from the Nielsen Norman group. So when you set this up, you create the tree. It's so easy in Figma these days to just have a clickable prototype that most people will just do a clickable prototype where I'm on the website and then I'll click on each category in the main menu. And then there are subcategories and subcategories. So you can do it either way. I will say that sometimes the cognitive load in context can change your results. So going back to like fluency, if your website is like really visually noisy and you have all these menu items up at the top, people might misclick more often when they see the actual page versus if you just give them a text version of whatever you're doing. But I show you this version because what's great about tree testing is you don't need to have a design to work on your information architecture and collect data on your information architecture. So this could be like before you've even designed the page or the product or the experience, you're testing where would people go to find X or Y. So create the tree, then you tell them what you want. Imagine you want to renew your driver's license. Where would you look? Then the user clicks through and then you measure things like time on task, how many people succeeded, how many people failed, how many clicks did it take them. And then, like I said, often you'll hear first click. So what was their first click on the task? Questions about tree testing?
So this is just like a root folder subdirectory structure, right?
It is like that is a context where information architecture is at play, but like we're seriously just talking about any menu that exists in the world. So like
What I'm saying is like this in the tree, this dark blue one is the root folder of the site, right? And then every subdirectory is the directory structure, essentially.
that is an analogy you could use to describe this hierarchical.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
okay.
Yep, totally. So like just in case this isn't clear, here we are on Amazon and like under pharmacy or groceries or something. Here's that first level and then you could click into the next level. So if I said, where would you find toothbrushes? That would be the task. And then maybe people would click on household health and baby. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of other options under that. And then eventually they're going to find toothbrushes. Great. Okay. So that's tree testing, one way to assess your information architecture. Other ways to assess information architecture include card sorting. So here's an actual image of someone doing a card sort activity. And pro tip with card sorts, you don't want to use sticky notes. Nope. If you're ever in person and you're doing a card sort, don't use sticky notes. Use index cards because they can move around on a table. Sticky notes stick and it becomes not ideal. Okay, so types of card sorting. Card sorting is exactly what you think it is. People have a bunch of items and they're sorting them into categories. And as a researcher or a designer, you're just taking that data and doing something with it. There are different types of card sorts. There's open card sort, where participants tell you what they expect. So let's say I have 50 items and I want someone to come up with the navigation structure. Like what should be on my home level 0 global navigation bar. And then people will tell you how they would organize those 50 items. They'll tell you what they would label each of those menu options. So they're generating a bunch of things for you. Sometimes they may even generate items for you depending on the context. But in the case of e-commerce, for example, let's say we sell a bunch of like hygiene and personal care products. We sell toothbrushes and we sell hairbrushes and we sell deodorant, like all of that kind of stuff. We might ask people like, here is a list of the 50 things we sell. We put one on each index card. Now sort them into categories. So like I wouldn't go to the same section for toothbrushes as I would for deodorant. You can think about how a grocery store or like a drugstore is laid out. Same thing, right? Like once you find the toothbrushes, you know that floss is going to be over there and like toothpaste is going to be over there, and you have these mental models. Okay, so open card sort, participants define your categories. Closed card sorts are, here are the 5 categories we have. Here are the 50 items, which item goes in which category. And you might even constrain it more by saying an item can only be in one category. So this is pretty much just how structured or unstructured is your test. Is it open where participants are telling you what categories should exist, or is it closed where you're telling the participant? Most of the time in my life, I've done closed or something in between these two, because the place I work for, a lot of the e-commerce companies, it's like, we have these 5 departments. We're not going to change the names of our departments. Just tell us what items go in which department. Okay, that's a closed card sort. So to illustrate this a little bit, stack of cards on an open card sort, they sort them into groups and then they add labels to those groups. Closed card sort, they get a stack of cards. We tell them what the labels are and they put which cards go under which labels. Questions on this? Great. And of course, we're living in the gray zone. So there's hybrid card sorts as well. And this is just some combination of the two. So sometimes you can change the names of departments to a point. Like we can't change the name of the clothing department, but beyond that, we're open to reimagining our categories. So then you'll give them some constrained labels, like you need to have these 2 departments and what would you put in those? And then they're generating other labels. So this doesn't have to be a black and white thing, just depending on the research question you have and the constraints you have in the business, you might take one approach or the other. You might also do a moderated versus an unmoderated card sort. So this is a very common distinction in UX research. I'm going to do an unmoderated usability test or a moderated usability test. And this is just whether someone else is present and facilitating the test, or whether someone's doing this asynchronously on their own. So in a moderated situation, back in the day, card sorts were often in person. So it's like I'd have a group of people. They'd all get their stacks of cards. Sometimes I'd put them in different rooms, or sometimes I'd put them in the same room, but like in different areas, different tables. And then I'd say, okay, here's your stack of cards. And I'd walk around to each table and have each participant describe to me why they put each thing where they did. I'd also maybe like we'd come together as a group and discuss the ones that were really confusing across different people. So that was a really common activity. Now everything's digital for the most part. You can create a card sort activity on any whiteboarding tool, digital whiteboarding tool like FigJam, Miro, Mural, Lucid Spark, whatever online whiteboarding tool you're using. So you can still do that moderated, like jumping on a Zoom with folks, or you can do a completely unmoderated session where you can't really ask follow-up questions. It's fast and you can get a larger sample size. It's also, cheaper, but then you might not get that qualitative, the why or the rationale behind things. Questions on moderated versus unmoderated? Any of you are familiar with this terminology? So when do you use a card sort? navigation. If you have any questions, any arguments about navigation, which if you work in e-commerce, you will, the card sorting activities are a great place to start. The other thing too is I often do, let's say folks are arguing about whether there should be a certain category on the website or a certain menu item. I might get a bunch of my stakeholders in a room and do an internal card sort activity just so it's like really clear where our discrepancies are. Like, oh, marketing really wants this category on the menu, and the merchandising team doesn't want that category on the menu. A great example of an argument I have had with folks, like facilitated many times, is around the holidays. A lot of e-commerce sites will add an item to their global navigation menu called gifts. So it's like, or popular gifts. So sometimes folks are really excited about that. Like marketing might want to have popular gifts because they might want to create ads that drop people right in popular gifts, right? Or the merchandising and brand departments are like, we don't want gifts cluttering up our stuff. We just want people to explore the regular departments we have. So these kinds of discussions are examples of when you might use a card sort. And then what belongs in gifts, right? That's when you would go to your users. You can also do card sort activities. I mean, I don't want you to think of this as just a navigation thing. If there's ever a process like you need to spell out, I'm going to go back to my customer support representatives, like people who are working a queue of support requests. Okay, what do you do first when you get to work? What do you do second? What do you do third? Like, how do you troubleshoot this issue? How do you know that the information you're giving the person requesting help is accurate? What steps do you take? And I might have them write those things on index cards or put those things on a mural board. And as a group, we might arrange those different items. So it's a sorting activity. Could totally call that a card sort. You might also do this with feature importance or feature usage. How often do you use the new music feature on Duolingo? Let's have all the Duolingo features and then sort them by most important to least important, or most used to least used. So that's another way you could do a card sort. And like I said, internal stuff. So I've done card sort activities with folks just to say, here are all of the things we could build into the product in the next 6 months. Let's prioritize them together. And then once we prioritize them, let's actually put them on a timeline. What are we going to build first? What are we going to build second? What are we going to build third? So card sorting. Often when we're talking about it, it's just an information architecture thing, but you can totally see how this method extends to all kinds of different cases. So it's a good tool in your tool belt to have when attacking any kind of research question. Thoughts? Has anyone ever done a card sort before? Not yet. Serena, Mark.
I have a question. I haven't done
Oh.
it yet. I just wonder, would this card sorting come before or after heuristic evaluation? So instead of a usability testing, would you say that it's quicker data for a specific feature than usability testing, depending on like if it's qualitative or quantitative?
I mean,
Different separate entity that you don't want them to be lumped together.
I have done heuristic evaluations before, after. I think these aren't even card sorting. I've described maybe you haven't even built the product yet, and that's what you're trying to discover is what should the menu be. But sometimes it's like Amazon and it's been around for forever. So I don't think they come in any particular order. And I also think that when it comes to heuristic evaluation, there's not a whole lot of overlap other than like clear visual signifiers. Like you want people to be able to read your menu. You want people to be able to interact with your menu. So your heuristic evaluation might make your menu more usable, but the actual categories, the actual hierarchy of everything, that's like information architecture land, and that's where you need to use methods like this. Does that answer your question? Okay. Gori.
I just wanted to confirm that we can use card sorting even when we have categories that have not been like vaguely assigned, or when the product is like before development of the product, and even if it is a more developed product, we can still use card sorting. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, and I've done it at all stages for different outcomes. So you can imagine if I told you all to like build an e-commerce app and we're gonna sell office supplies and 3D printed animals. That's what we're gonna sell. So how will you do the like how is the menu laid out if we sell office supplies and 3D printed animals? You might not know the answer to that question. So you might approach it by getting feedback from a bunch of users, and then you find out, oh, well, users actually put 3D printed animals in like desk accessories or fidget toys or something like that. And it's a subcategory, it's not a main menu navigation. So yeah, that could be like we're creating this product for the first time, or you're walking into something and people are bickering about whether to add gifts or whether to add. We have a new product offering. I'll show you some examples later, some real examples that I've gotten to argue about with folks. But we have a new product, 3D printed animals, and we don't know where to put it on our e-commerce site. Like, where were finger monkeys on the women's clothing and lifestyle products? Like, where did we even, what department did those live in, right? So we had a department that was called lifestyle, and then under it, it was like the word fun, and people like that's where we put things like that. So was that ideal? I don't know. We need to ask some users about that. Okay, let's do one. Great. I'm going to walk you through this case study, and then we're going to do a card sort activity. And the case study here is based off of a real website called care.com, where you are trying to find a caregiver. Find a caregiver. So I want you to imagine that someone in your life who's much older than you has reached a point where they need some kind of care. Could be your parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, what have you, but someone needs care. They'd like to be living in their home and maintaining a good quality of life, but they need a little bit of assistance with certain daily activities. So you might start to look for caregivers. And there are lots of websites that help facilitate finding a caregiver that can come to the home of your loved one. And one of them is called care.com, but there are many competitors as well. So here we are. We need to find a caregiver for our loved one. And some of the sort of daily activities that you can imagine a caregiver could provide are things like medications, companionship, physical activity, personal care and hygiene, transportation, check-ins, doctor's appointments, just wellness checks, checking their blood pressure, checking their oxygen levels, maybe some housekeeping, does their laundry, cooks their meals, right? Goes grocery shopping. So these are all really common activities when it comes to finding caregivers that you might need to be fulfilling for someone. And the journey I want to walk you through, the journey of care.com right now. Is anyone familiar with Thumbtack? You ever used Thumbtack? Okay, maybe two of you. Thumbtack is like it's a platform where if you need some kind of service, like I need someone to cut down a tree, or I need someone to walk my dog, or I need someone, I'd like a life coach, I'd like a nutritionist, but you're looking for independent folks, like even to do your taxes, you can go on Thumbtack and say, I have this job that I want someone to do. And then you can look through the profiles of people who provide that service. So you pretty much like put a job out there, and then you select people that you'd like to reach out to connect with that job. Serena, thanks for clarifying. Yes, Thumbtack. I mean, it comes from, in the way back, we used to have bulletin boards. So it was like, yeah, I'm a really good swim coach, Megan. Like, I'm a really good swim coach. I give swim lessons to adults. So I'm going to print out flyers, and I'm going to Thumbtack the flyers to all these bulletin boards. And then maybe you've seen this in movies or in person, but like you tear off the little thing, like there's a phone number strip and you tear off the little phone number strip so you can go call them. That's the way this used to work. Okay, so Thumbtack is a platform like that. And the reason I bring it up is because the journey on Care is a lot like Thumbtack. So the journey is you create a job request. So I'm looking for a caregiver for my mother. Create this job request. Then it spits out based on some input, like you fill out this form, this job request, and here it is. Create a new job. So you like select jobs, create a new job, and then it asks you, what kind of job do you need? Oh, I need senior care. So I click on senior care. Once I give it some additional information about this job, like where I'm located and how much I'm willing to pay, for example, then it does this, we're looking for this, and it spits out a list of people. So here are a bunch of people in Salt Lake City, Utah, who provide caregivers. Hi, I'm Chastity. Hi, I'm Lana. And they each have a profile, right? And there's even like the price range, how many years of experience. So you may want to filter this initial list it gives you. So like, I only want people fill in blank. Not even going to look at profiles that don't meet some criteria. But let's say we really like one of these, and so we click on them. Yeah, great. And then we go to their caregiver profile. So once we go to their profile, which I don't have a screenshot of, unfortunately, we read up all about Lana, and then we can contact Lana to facilitate like maybe an introduction call to decide whether to hire her. And we select a caregiver. And then the platform will keep prompting like, did you find your caregiver yet? And then once we've selected somebody and hired them, we're like, yes, we found the person. So this is the journey. Any questions on this journey? Great. So what factors, my question for you is like, what factors do you think would be important to determine a caregiver? And I really want you to think about like someone specific in your life and imagine they are of a certain age and need this care. So think about someone in your life who you would facilitate this sort of service for. What kinds of things would you want to know? What factors would help you choose a caregiver?
Availability. So
Great.
you want your caregiver depending on what time they're available.
Yes, like maybe you know that like my mom is her best self in the morning. So I'd like for the caregiver to be there for the first 2 hours in the morning to make sure she's all set up for the day, and then they don't need to be there anymore. So anyone who's only available in evenings is not going to work.
Or like vice versa when you need someone especially in the evening.
Right.
Because there are some caregivers that provides 24-hour service, and specifically it's when you're not home or you have to be like away for some time. You want someone to be like available that time.
Right. Yes, I think availability is huge. Ian dropped in the chat, like, my grandma had no filter. This is a common executive function decline with age. So someone with some resiliency, someone who can weather the storm of grandpa's swearing a lot at them or something similar. Yes, go Ree.
Experience or qualification? More like experience, yeah.
Yeah, so experience, like years of experience, but I like that you say qualification. Some of us might want someone certified. And honestly, like if I'm thinking about my mom, I want like FBI stamp of approval that this person is amazing. And I want like a private investigator to watch them for 2 days and make sure that they're kind to puppies. Do you know what I mean? Like I need this level of confidence that a stranger is going to come into the home of a loved one and be reputable and professional and treat this person with care and kindness and respect. Megan says cost. Yes, cost is huge, right? I can only afford X dollars an hour. Elizabeth says experience, proximity. So if they live 3 hours away, even if they're willing to come, like if I need them kind of on short notice, they're not going to be able to be there for 3 hours. Patience, as in what Ian was saying, having patience for someone. specialization. So do they have any specialties? This goes beyond certification. Like if we were looking for someone who specialized in mobility issues, right? Reliability, their fitness status. Okay, Gori is right. Can they lift someone out of bed? Can they help someone get up when they've fallen? Insurance. Is my insurance going to cover it? Empathy. Yes, I think some personality traits might be very interesting to get a little bit of an indicator on. Sean says reviews, 100%. Wouldn't it be great to see like 50 glowing reviews of Lana before we hired her? You might even want to call someone who has used this caregiver in the past or hired this caregiver in the past to like give a recommendation. Excellent. Yes. Yeah, are they capable of doing the things? So like my mom is vegan. Can they cook vegan meals for my mom? Do they know what vegan is? Are they capable of doing that? If there are household sort of like chores or maybe things that need to be fixed really frequently, can they do those sorts of odd jobs? Or yeah, do they have any skills that way? Hannah, I'm so glad you bring this up. Culture, gender, different like identity groups and background. That is super important. Even language, right? So if you have a parent who speaks a different language as their primary language, you may want to prefer someone who can speak their primary language or have some sensitivity to certain like cultural preferences, cultural norms.
That me like gender. Did we talk about gender yet?
I just like listed it in that list, but you're right. I know my mom would not want a male assistant because it's like, okay, well, if this person is going to help bathe someone, that might be a factor for them. Hannah?
This activity kind of reminds me of what I do for my job for my clients because on the website they have filters where they show like, do you prefer someone of a specific gender? Do you prefer someone of specific like background or like cultural background? And the parents or the person paying for these services, they have the option to select or turn on off these filters according to like what they need. So I find this very interesting to do, and like I find this like very helpful for the person who needs the services.
Right. Yeah, I think this particular case, I say like find a caregiver, and it seems like, okay, great. But then when you start thinking about like you're finding a caregiver for your favorite uncle, all of a sudden it's like, well, how often are they on their phone? I don't know. You just want to know all kinds of specific things about them. And can they have a 10-hour conversation about trains? Whatever it is, you want to make sure that they're a good fit for this person. And how do you capture that? How do you capture that on a website, on a profile? How do you search or filter or find the right match? And yeah, to Gori's point, like I said, I want FBI on these people. I want like the most extensive background check you can imagine. I want to know that they like smacked another second grader when they were in second grade. Like I want to know that level of detail on these people, right? So when you start thinking about this, there's actually a lot going into this decision. So this is a good time to take a break. When we get back, we're going to talk through what the business wants you to do here and then do a card sort activity for this use case. Okay, let's take like 13 minutes. So I have 10:07. If we can come back at 10:20, that'd be great. And we're back. I just have like a whole sea under the sea theme today. Teresa and Ian are working on a platform that is all about caregiver tools, resources, training, monitoring. So this assignment is very aligned with what you're thinking about. Okay, while folks are rejoining, here's care.com. So find care, find a job, senior care, find care. Yeah, this whole concept of a job. Any other factors anyone thought about in terms of finding a caregiver? I think we covered most of them. Great. Okay, so the business case here. What is the business asking you to do? So when you first submit your job request, job request. When you first submit that request and it spits out that list of potential matches, there are filters. So you can filter that list, but we can only have a few filters on that list. All the other information needs to go on the caregiver profile. So the question the business is trying to answer is, what should the filters be versus what should be on the caregiver profile? And I want you to really put your hat on of being a user in this situation. We just described a bunch of different factors that could be at play. But in this case, that initial filter is really like, I don't even want to consider someone. I can't even consider someone for this job unless they meet this basic criteria. So be thinking about the filter as this initial, like, black and white. I won't even look at these profiles if they don't have or they do have whatever factor. So what we're going to do is, here are all of the actual filters and options from care.com. And we're going to do a hybrid card sort, you all being the users in this situation. And I'm going to allow you to create any other items that are missing from this list. So on the Miro board, I have one sticky note that says other, but you can create multiple. Just make it clear, like bold them or italicize them or do something that makes it clear they were generated by you. So you can generate more items. And then I'm going to give you filters, caregiver profile. Maybe there are things that belong in the job request according to you. And maybe there are things that belong in other sections of the website. So I'm giving you those options as well. The business question is really, what should the filters be? But we're going to do this activity with all of this in mind. So you don't have to use any of the other categories. And if you want to categorize everything in terms of these two things, then go for it. Any questions on like the high level description of this task? So this is what the Miro board looks like. Your first challenge today is that there are all of these different canvases, one for each of you, but it's going to be like a land grab weird scramble because I didn't put your names on them. So you're all just going to have to find one that's blank and hope no one else is using it. So good luck to you in that scramble. But once you overcome that challenge, I gave you these high level categories. So the filter, the caregiver profile, a couple of others, and then all of those different elements. And I just want you to categorize. And what I'm expecting is like this sort of thing, where this is the category and these are the items underneath it. Make sure it's really clear the separation between categories. So give lots of space between things so that it's easy to read. Any questions, Teresa?
Sorry, can you say again the difference between the list filter and the caregiver profile?
Yes. So when I submit a job and I select senior, I maybe tell it where I live and maybe my budget or something. Unclear, but it spits out this list. And I want you to imagine that on this list, there's an option to like filter. So if I clicked on this, it would pop out a little window and there would be just a few things I could filter by. And you're trying to say what goes in this filter. Everything else is going to be, I click on chastity and then I see like a profile, right? And it's going to be all her information. Everything else goes there. But maybe there are things that don't really belong on the profile at all, and you might want to move those around. So I'm giving you the option. Any other questions? Okay, here is the Miro board. This is an individual task. So I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to play the Miro music, which you can mute or unmute at your however you'd like. And we're just going to fill out the sections.
Can I ask, what do you mean by G tubes?
Yeah, so that is if you have a certain medical condition, you need to be fed via a G tube.
Thank you.
Yeah, Danny, can you repost the link?
There we go.
Thank you.
Looks like some folks still need a minute, so I gave you another minute. If you haven't sort of cleaned things up to make it pretty legible, you can spend some time making sure everything's very clear.
I think I don't know, for some reason I can't drag some of them over to the part. Like it takes like a couple clicks for me to do that.
Weird. Is anyone else experiencing that? Let me see if there's anything. I'll just make sure everything's unlocked for you.
It might be just my computer, but my mural board is working in slow-mo, so it takes like 5 seconds for my post-it to drag from one side to the other,
Oh, fun.
and I'm losing it.
Okay. Well, it looks like most people, well, how are we doing? Who needs a little bit more time? 1, 2, 3. Okay. You can continue doing your sort. Anyone have any like ahas or things they would like to share about their experience sorting things today?
I mean, I guess I can talk briefly about mine. I use the other oh my goodness, where'd that board go? There it is. I use the other categories, and one I put was lifestyle compatibility. I know I could have put it under like caregiver profile, but I feel like there are some that just deserve their own filter, like bilingual, non-smoker, comfortable with pets, so on and so forth. A lot more niche things that might not be directly addressed in a caregiver profile or would have too much information on a caregiver profile if it was there. So
Yeah, in your ideal world, where would those live in the journey we were discussing?
that is a great question. I guess maybe under caregiver profile itself, like another option.
So do you imagine, because you mentioned like there were some niche things, so would those be things you'd want to filter off of or things that would be like prominent on the profile? What do you imagine?
I guess maybe things you want to filter off of or start with, like, hey, I need someone specifically for this task. And then from that, I'll start looking at everything else.
Okay, so maybe some things you'd like to see in filters. Teresa?
I categorized like the kind of general filters with just general things about the caregiver, like in-home care, non-smoker, on call, and then I figured that there could be like a separate, more niche category within the filtering for actions that they can do. So, like if the user wants to continue and have more niche stuff, then they could just go to the actions. And then there's also one for like demographic specializations. So if they want to look into like for like infants will be there, children or special needs. And then the caregiver profile is where they could put their like personality characteristics, is what I was thinking.
Gotcha. So it does sound like a lot of those are ideally filters you would have on that initial list, but you've created categories to try to, I guess, keep the filter organized, the filter list organized.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. It kind of sounds like what Ian was talking about, because you do have the demographics. So it kind of feels like, wow, we really want to filter off of a lot of things, ideally. Okay. So for those of you who have not yet completed your board, I have this sticker. If you zoom out, I have this like little warning symbol. If you'll copy it and paste it on your board until you are completed, just so we're aware of who's still kind of working on theirs. How many folks, just out of curiosity, how many folks were just having any kind of trouble with Miro today? Like moving slowly? 1, 2, 3. Okay. This is good for me to know in the future. You know what I mean? Miro, I have a Miro account and I have a Mural account. I don't know that Mural is faster or like more performant than Miro, but maybe we'll try it later. It's also, I mean, there are 19 people in this session, so it could be that later it's easier to do. Okay, so I'm gonna move forward, but you can come back to your canvas and keep working on it as needed. So we did this hybrid sort. How many people created a new category? Anyone besides? Okay. Wow, more than half of you created a new category. How many of you added items? Did anyone add any items? Okay, 2 of you. Great. Let's take a look here. So I want you to imagine this was a completely open card sort where we could have let people categorize these items. Because I don't know if you noticed, but there are things that are like higher level, such as I think there's like specialized care. Yeah, personal care. And those things might contain kind of to Teresa's point here, there may be like some of these may be category or subcategory labels, and other items might be existing at the same level of detail. So we could have done an open card sort where we just let people categorize everything. And then we could have asked people to generate the categories that they were interested in. We could have also asked them at that point to tell us what would be really important to be able to filter their list off of. So we could have done that approach. I think there are merits to that approach. But we can't always choose the optimal method, which is partially why I forced you into this hybrid card sort option. It's also the most representative of what you'll do on the job and produces almost the messiest data. Open card sorts are wild. Sometimes you'll get all kinds of interesting data. I once had a person, this was in an e-commerce setting, who during a closed card sort, which we can talk about as well. So let's imagine we had done this as a closed card sort and we just said, okay, it either goes in job request, filter the list of caregivers, no more than 7 filters. Maybe we even constrain them like that, or it goes on profile, and none of them are like, we could say that they're all mutually exclusive. I don't think we would do that in this case. I think kind of everything goes on profile, but who knows? So we could have constrained this. I was once doing a closed card sort and a person took a piece of paper to label a category and ripped it in half to create 2 categories. So like this is the messiness of real data, is like, oh, I told them 6 categories and this person was like, no, 7 categories. So these kinds of things can happen. And the thing is the data is kind of messy and nuanced. So there's a lot of subjectivity in the interpretation of the data. And that's something that as the researcher, it's your responsibility to try to navigate how to interpret the data in a way that reflects what you know about the users and how the users were trying to express themselves. So we also could have just said, out of all of these options, what are the 5 most important things to you? Maybe we don't even tell the users this is about filters. Maybe we just say, what are the 5 most important things when trying to choose a caregiver? And we take those 5 things and make them filters. So that could have been an approach as well. So for your homework assignment, I mentioned this is all going to roll up to your homework assignment. You're going to be working with the data you produced in class today. So I don't want anyone to go back and change theirs. You can certainly go back and finish yours, but I don't want anyone to go back and change yours because the data is the data, and that's the whole point. So you're going to use that card sort data to answer the business question we just described. What goes in filters and what goes on caregiver profile? Maybe you uncover something related to caregiver profile, but really like what goes in filters? And the business wants you to have very few filters. I didn't constrain you with a number like 5 or 7. But I think the last time I graded this assignment, everyone who did more than 6 or 7 lost points because no one had a very compelling argument for including more filters. So I would say shoot for 5 or fewer. You're going to create slides to present this. And I want this to one-to-one be a portfolio item you could use. So you're going to introduce the problem that you were trying to solve and the constraints. You're going to tell me the methods that were used, how many participants. There were 18 of you, which I'll put in the documents and such. And I want you to freely critique the work here. So what were the limitations of the project? What were the limitations of the method? What would you have done differently next time? What would you do next? Is there any kind of tests you would want to run after the fact? You do have to make some recommendations to the business on what belongs in filters and what belongs in caregiver profile. And you do need to provide some rationale to why you came to that conclusion based on this data. I add this in here, and every year, like only maybe 3 people take me up on it. So no hard feelings, but bonus points if you want to try to quantify something. So if you can see a way to statsify this, which there are many ways you could do that. If you include it, I will grant you extra credit points depending on your answer. If you include it and you're horribly wrong, no points deducted, no points gained, no points lost. But if you attempt it and it provides some compelling rationale or clarifies something, then I will grant you extra credit points based on how well you did. And I'm not going to constrain that either. One person really impressed me one time and I granted them like 15 extra credit points. So it just kind of depends on what you produce. Now, some of you don't have the bandwidth in your lives to take on a bonus challenge, and I respect that for you. So please do the assignment and then decide whether you want to take on the bonus. Let's look though. I want to set you up for success in this assignment. I never want you to toil. I never want you to spend your time on an assignment toiling away on something silly. So I've tried to set up some things for you, and I'm going to walk through how we might go about analyzing the data to get you all kind of in the same headspace. I'm also going to have you all enter in some data, so no one's spending 45 minutes entering data. So here's what we're going to do. I have this sheet, and you'll have access to this. This is just in the course Google Drive. It's also in the assignment description. Here's the link to the raw data, the actual, nope, that's not the right link because that's a mural link. I think that's last year's link. I will link to the Miro board that you all worked in. And then we do have one student who was absent and is going to fill out theirs later, like within the next 24 to 48 hours. If you start on your assignment and they don't get their data in, you can use n equals 17. Otherwise, it equals 18. Okay, so I've listed all of the things for you because I really don't want you to be spending your time creating this sheet. And I just like gave you, okay, filter by caregiver profile. You could count all of these, right? You could count how many people classified registered nurse as filter or caregiver profile. That would be a really reasonable way to start synthesizing this data. Instead of having each of you spend 45 minutes counting each other's things, I think it'll be a lot easier if we just enter in what you were doing. So for those of you who didn't quite finish, you can actually just do this here. And what I'd like for you to do is either say filter, F, or profile, oops, P for each one. Did you classify it as F or P? And many of you created a different category or didn't put it in either one or put it in both, in which case you can put O for other or you can put B for both. So if anything, if you didn't if one of these landed in some other category, go ahead and put O. But I'm going to drop the link to this and we're going to spend it's going to take like 8 minutes or something for you all to F and P everything. And then you're going to have this to be able to count easily. Questions on what I'm asking? Great. So please, like, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but please like reference the Miro that you just did and go ahead and enter in your data.
Dani, if I wasn't able to like sort, because I was still having issues with the whole like dragging things, how do I put what I would have put them into?
Yeah, you can do that. I think everyone's going to be most concerned about what you selected for filters. So if you have those, but you can also just go through the list here and kind of decide where you would put each one.
Yeah, because I tried again, it's still not working for me.
Totally fine.
Dani, I have a suggestion for the Excel sheet. Would it be all right if we actually put the card source into like alphabetical order to make it easier to find? Or I mean,
Yes.
are people already starting to put
I
inputs
think
too, but I don't know if that'll
everyone's
change.
Yeah, everyone's kind of on their way. I kept this in the order that it was originally in because people do tend to go sequentially through. But like I said, everyone's going to care the most about what you put in filter. So I would just like do that category first and then fill out everything else.
Hi Dani. I don't know if you set up the table a certain way or something, but my name isn't there and I'm afraid to add myself in.
Oh, Yeah, let's put you at the end. Music is a lot. I don't like it. I'm gonna choose a different one. Okay, looks like most people got done. A few people didn't. You can continue adding. A few questions. So we have the benefit of you're all here. So Sean, I saw P and P on yours. Can you unpack that?
Personality and preferences.
Okay, so that would be like an other.
Oh, that was like that blue. It was the blue one that was on it.
Okay, so you created a category and then put stuff on under there.
No, I didn't create it. It was a category that was.
That was
It was like a blue
actually,
thing.
so what happened, I was trying to paste it, but then I accidentally pasted it somewhere else. I'm so sorry for that.
Oh no. Oh.
That was you?
Yeah,
I thought it was Danny. I was like, okay, I'm gonna just use this, I guess.
I thought it was Danny too. Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah,
I'm
so I guess I would say in that case, I would classify those as other probably. And then any other Mark, you have F and P, which I think means both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Looks good. So we have this data. And if you didn't finish the 2 or 3 of you, you can come back to this and complete this in a few minutes. But I want to walk you through like maybe some initial steps of analysis so you all feel good about the homework assignment. So this is the actual data you'll use for the homework assignment. And as an example, I'm going to share my screen now. As an example, I have a lot of things that folks have argued about in the past. So here are the categories on this hypothetical e-commerce experience: accessories, home, beauty, health and wellness, lifestyle. And I'm going to systematically pick on a few of you. So how about, let's say, Megan, will you help me? Where would you put backpacks?
Lifestyle?
Sorry, your audio was a little bit quiet. Was that lifestyle?
Yes.
Okay. What about toothbrushes, bamboo toothbrushes?
Health and wellness.
Okay. What about bath salts?
Health and wellness.
Okay. I'm gonna pick on Teresa. Where would you put candles?
Lifestyle,
Okay. How about CBD cigarettes?
lifestyle,
Essential oil diffusers?
probably health and wellness,
What about fabric refresher sprays?
maybe home,
I'm like internally laughing just recalling all the arguments. Face masks?
beauty,
Great. I'm gonna pick on Jack next. Where would you put fidget toys?
Accessories,
And how about fragrances?
beauty,
Handmade soaps?
health and wellness,
Hats?
accessories.
Great. Okay, thank you for
No
those of
problem.
you who contributed. You see how, I hope you saw, as you're going through this, we don't all agree, do we? Like, let me tell you, CBD cigarettes and CBD lotions have come up at multiple places I've worked as like hotly contested, whether they belong in lifestyle, health, beauty, all kinds of things there. Meditation cushions, meditation shawl. Does this belong in accessories, meditation shawl? Or does it belong in health and wellness? Or does it belong in lifestyle? So lots of arguments can be had, and I hope you can appreciate some of this. So let's see here. The first thing you might do, be a reasonable approach, is just to figure out, let's say we did a card sort and it was a mutually exclusive, like each one of these items can only be in one category. Say we did a card sort with 100 people for simplicity's sake. We could just count and say how many people put backpacks in each category. And in this case, we had 46 of the 100 people put backpacks and accessories, 42 put it in lifestyle. Some folks were feeling home and health and wellness, right? So you could just do this. And if you had these frequencies, what would you want to know? Like, I'm curious, what would you want to know to determine where bath salts belongs? Mark?
You mean like where in the like site architecture it would be? I would want to know like what other products they think belong, like what other like 2 or 3 things do they think like most closely belong with that? But not,
Go ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say not necessarily just which category has the most like in terms of where people put it, but like I guess where they would be going before and after if they're looking at bath salts.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes let's go to meditation actually. So we've got these meditation cushions and meditation shawls. If we put meditation shawl in accessories, that's to Mark's point. If we put meditation shawl in accessories and I land on the page somehow where I'm looking at the meditation shawl, and you know how at the top there are the breadcrumbs, and I'll go back to accessories. Someone who's looking at a meditation shawl might not be looking at hats and belts. In fact, like there's a lot of intention about like if someone's looking at a meditation shawl, we might want to strategically put them in health and wellness. Even though the shawl was an accessory, but does it belong in health and wellness just because the intention around if I click on an ad for a meditation shawl and I land on that page, the other things on the site I might care about might be in health and wellness. So I like that point. And like if you thought these arguments were straightforward, I guess to that point, there's some strategy here of we're actually going to put this thing in a category that maybe only 50% of users put it in because we want people to explore that category if they have that intention. But focusing on this data, one thing that Mark said is just like, well, there's some strategy going on here. We could be intentional about where we're putting things. But looking at like belts, where would you put belts?
Accessory.
Accessories. Because 89% of our users put belts in accessories. It's a pretty straightforward situation. Like, okay, there aren't very many people who are putting it in other categories. So we might just want to go with the majority on this one. And this is where I want you to think about this. So if I sorted by each of these categories and I'm just looking at like, okay, even just these top three, rings, belts, hats, 98%, 89%, 78%. These are all pretty strong trends in favor of accessories. You might not want to waste your time, energy, etc., thinking through where these belong when 78% or greater are putting them all in accessories. What becomes interesting is when you start getting into the like 50, 40, 30%, when there starts to be an even split between two things, or a pretty even split between a few things. And then it's like, oh no, like hypothetically, 35% would go to health and wellness for a smartwatch, 45% would go to accessories. So what do we do? If we want each product to be in one category, think about those breadcrumbs we were just talking about. I can't have both. I can't have it, if you land on the smartwatch page, I can't have it go to both accessories and health and wellness if you try to navigate outward. So what do? So this kind of approach, I think, is a pretty reasonable approach. Like you just start sorting, and I threw in some color just to help myself kind of think through what are the top ones for each of these categories, right? And then there are some that are going to be split between a few categories, and you might want to look at those very carefully. But you don't need to spend a ton of time on the items where it's really clear which category it belongs in. So focus a little bit more on the nuanced things. In our data, you're going to have what percentage of people have the thing in filter versus anything else. And that's your number one research question. What belongs in filter? So you might take the approach of like, what item was most commonly classified in filter, right? And you'll see here on this, like, I just created a little visual for myself. Like, what's the prevalence of each category for each one of these things? And it starts to give me a really easy way of going, okay, rings really belongs in accessories. Nail polish really belongs in beauty. I don't need to spend my research time on those more extensively. So there's your starting place. And then I think some of you will start to see how you might quantify things, compare things, report confidence intervals or statistics of some kind if you chose to do that. You're going to make recommendations to the business about what belongs in filter and what belongs in customer profile. But take the qualitative too. A lot of people, more than half of you, created a new category. Go back to the data. What categories were those? Were there any things that thematically were the same? Maybe make that recommendation to the business as well if you think it makes sense. How do you feel about this homework assignment? Okay. Any questions, Teresa?
So should we be trying to figure out what that other category should be labeled as kind of another task, or is that just kind of like up to us if we want to tackle that?
It's up to you if you want to tackle that. That being said, if the fact that more than half of people created a new category, I'm going to look at the data, and if a lot of those are the same category, then I'm going to expect you to be mentioning it somehow because it was a finding in your data. You can certainly say, we don't know what to do with this. We would do these tests to figure out what this means. So you can take a next steps approach. You don't have to recommend that, you know, the website completely overhaul their navigation or something like that. The research question that business wants you to solve is what belongs in filter? Secondarily, what belongs in profile, because we're just making the assumption that everything belongs in profile. But if you have some other recommendation that you can glean from this data, then I want you to go ahead and do that. Other questions? Okay, so let's see here. Nope. So here's your homework assignment description. I say create 3 to 15 slides. I don't know, just 15 is probably too many, 3 is probably too few. Just create slides as you would if you were delivering this to an organization. Because I'm asking for rationale, I'm not looking for like 2 words on slides as if you're presenting this. I'm looking for slides in terms of like you're delivering this as something someone can read, like an item in your portfolio that's a case study that someone could read. If you want to know where that line is, guess who has done a bunch of card sorts? Everyone. So Google anything you want to, or try going to a website like Behance and typing in card sort. This is a website where designers just like post stuff they've done. Think like Pinterest or Dribbble or some other website where people just post ideas. And look, people have just posted, there's a card sort report. Is it any good? I don't know. You'd have to read it and figure that out. Doesn't look like it's completely unreasonable from this glance. I don't know. Check it out. Check out 5 of these. Check out 10 of these and model some of your stuff after what you're seeing. So you don't have to do this blind. You don't have to do this without any context. Google what other people have done and take a page out of their book. That being said, remember, I have a rubric and kind of carefully look at the descriptions for what's in the rubric and what percentage of your points it is. Spoiler, most of it's recommendations and rationale behind your recommendations. You can submit a PowerPoint presentation, a link to Google Slides, assuming your permissions are correct. Something like Canva, great. Whatever place you want to make slides. And yeah, choose whether you want to adventure into stats. Here's the mural board. Here's the sheet we started working on. Does anyone have any other thoughts or questions on this? Serena?
I think I was confused from the very beginning. What exactly do you mean by like belongs in filter? Because in my head, the way I was thinking about it was, I think Teresa answered that question, but I didn't quite get it as well, was the fact that you have your navigation, like your subcategories and your filters on the side, and it's like, this is what I want to click when I want to filter by this.
Yes. So I want you to imagine this list, and it's not a feature that exists yet, but we'll just imagine that there's a button here called filter. And the constraints that I'm giving you are that when I click on filter, it's just gonna pop a little modal, and there's gonna be like a checkbox and a thing, and a checkbox and a thing. So I'm just gonna assume one of these is like price related. I don't know, right? Like sort lowest to highest price, for example. You're defining what's in here, but the business is saying, we don't want this to be an extensive, what you're probably thinking, where like we pop this out on the side and here are your 1,500 filters you could select from. We're not going to do that. We're just going to give a quick, what are the most important things people would want to filter off of?
Okay, and the others would be something like advanced filters if you're really interested in.
the business is only going to pop that little modal, and there's going to be like 5 things in there, and you're just telling them what 5 things go in there.